Hi, welcome in. This is an Original Tales first story, and honestly, I'm going to let the audacity of this situation speak for itself. Let's begin.
My parents sold my 11-year-old daughter's antique cello, the one she was gifted by my grandmother, an instrument valued at over $87,000, and they spent every dime of that money on an in-ground pool for my sister's kids. When my grandmother found out, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She smiled that terrifying, calm smile of hers and said, "The cello was." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the moment I realized my family had done something unforgivable. My parents' faces went pale when we walked in, but truthfully, I knew something was wrong before we even got to the music room. You know that feeling? You can smell a renovation the way you can smell a lie. It hits you in the back of the throat, fresh paint, sawdust, that sharp, chemical tang of epoxy that screams someone has spent a lot of money they didn't tell you about. My daughter, Lucy, climbed out of the car clutching her backpack, her music binder, and her rosin tin. She was moving light on her feet because the important part, the heavy part, was already inside. Her actual cello lived at my parents' house, in my grandma's old music room. Lived being the keyword I didn't understand yet. Lucy had been looking forward to this practice session all day. And I don't mean in a "yay, I did my chores" kind of way. I mean in a "this is who I am" kind of way. She'd been humming under her breath the entire car ride, tapping out complex rhythms on her knees, her eyes glazed over, already halfway into that focused little world she disappears into when she plays. "Do you think great-grandma will be there today?" Lucy asked, pulling her ponytail tighter, like she could control the chaotic universe with a single elastic band. "She's at her new place, honey," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Not today. We'll call her later, okay?" Lucy nodded, but her eyes stayed hopeful anyway. She had the sweet, naive idea that maybe my grandma had changed her mind overnight and come back to the big house simply because she missed the smell of my dad's aftershave and the sound of my mom's passive-aggressive sighs. Lucy didn't understand yet that when Grandma left, she left for good. We walked up to the front door. I used my key to let us in. Not because I'm especially trusted, mind you, but because I'm useful. There is a massive difference in family dynamics between being loved and being useful. One gets you hugs, the other gets you alarm codes and a list of errands to run. The second I pushed the door open, I heard it. A muffled whine of power tools somewhere in the background, vibrating through the floorboards. And the smell, definitely paint. Definitely construction. Definitely money. Lucy's face lit up immediately. "Are they fixing up the music room?" I didn't answer right away because my brain was still doing that slow, dumb buffering thing it does when reality doesn't match the script you have in your head. We stepped inside. A heavy canvas tarp covered the hallway runner, like the house was preparing for invasive surgery. Cardboard boxes lined the wall, stacked haphazardly. Someone had taped off the entryway to the living room with blue painter's tape, which in my mother's house is a polite way of saying, "Don't touch anything, peasant." Lucy tiptoed past the tape like she was walking through a museum exhibit. "Mom?" I called out, loud enough to reach whatever part of the house my mother currently ruled from. No answer. Just the grinding sound of machinery. Lucy didn't wait. She headed straight toward the back window that overlooked the yard. Whoa. I followed her gaze, and I felt my stomach drop through the floor. The backyard looked excavated. It looked like the earth had been peeled open and violently rearranged. A massive rectangle had been carved out where the pristine grass used to be. Piles of dirt sat like small, ugly mountains around the perimeter. There were wooden forms along the edges, jagged rebar sticking up like metal bones, and stacks of expensive pavers waiting to be laid. It wasn't finished, but it was absolutely not subtle. It was a pool. A full-on, luxury in-ground pool. Because why quietly improve your life when you can broadcast your wealth to the neighborhood with heavy machinery? Lucy blinked, pressing her hand against the glass. "Is that for us?" There was so much innocent hope in her voice that I actually hated everyone I was related to in that moment. "I don't know," I said carefully, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Let's get your cello." Focus on practice. We walked down the hall toward the music room. This room had always been my grandma's territory, even when she lived with my parents. She'd turned it into a sanctuary, temperature-controlled, a humidifier humming quietly in the corner, shelves stacked with yellowing sheet music, a lock on the cabinet because she wasn't born yesterday. Lucy loved it in there. She always said it smelled like wood polish and peppermint tea. I always thought it smelled like the only person in the family who believed in boundaries. I pushed open the door. The humidifier was still running, puffing out a little mist. The music stand was still there, set to Lucy's height. But the corner, the specific, padded corner where the cello case always rested, where Lucy's cello sat like a queen on a throne, was empty. Not moved. Not put away. Empty. Lucy didn't scream. She didn't even inhale. She just froze. Then, she walked to the corner slowly, stepping carefully like she was approaching a wild animal that might bite. She looked down at the empty spot on the rug. She looked up at the shelf. She looked behind the large armchair, like maybe a 4-foot-tall instrument had just fallen over and no one had noticed for several days. Then she turned to me. "Did great-grandma change her mind?" she asked. Her voice was small and careful, like she was trying not to disturb the air. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. "No, baby." Lucy swallowed. "Then, where is it?" She didn't sound angry. That would have been easier to deal with. She sounded terrified, like the question itself might get her in trouble. Her fingers drifted to the edge of the music stand, like she expected to feel the wood of the cello there, something real to ground her. And when her hand met nothing but air, she pulled it back fast, like she'd touched a hot stove. Her eyes got glossy, tears welling up, but she didn't let them fall. She just nodded once, too hard, like she was forcing the moment to behave. I didn't answer her because I didn't know, not for sure. But I could already feel in my gut where this was heading, and I hated that my kid was standing in the middle of it. "Stay here," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll be right back." I left Lucy standing in that empty music room because I needed her not to see my face when I found out the truth. I marched toward the kitchen. My mom was there, of course. She was always in the kitchen when she wanted to look like she was holding the family together with her bare hands. She had a ceramic mug in one hand and her phone in the other. Her hair was pulled back tight like she'd been busy, which in my family usually means busy ignoring something important. My dad sat at the table, scrolling through something on his tablet, calm as a man who believes the world will always make room for him. And then there was my sister, Rachel. She was perched on a stool, sipping something green and expensive looking. She didn't look up when I walked in. She barely ever did. "Where's Lucy's cello?" I asked. No preamble. No greeting. My mom blinked slowly, like she was confused why I'd bring up something so inconvenient during her morning coffee. "Good morning to you too, Emily," she said, her tone dripping with fake politeness. I stared at her. I didn't blink. My dad sighed, a heavy, dramatic exhale. "What's the problem now?" I could feel my heart doing that annoying thing where it tries to climb out of my chest to find a quieter family. "Lucy's cello," I repeated, enunciating every syllable. "Where is it?" Rachel snorted without looking up from her phone. "Oh, please." My mom took a leisurely sip of her coffee. "Your father handled it." Handled it. That phrase is like a giant red flag printed in cursive. In this house, handled it meant something had been destroyed, sold, or altered to suit them. "Handled it how?" I asked, stepping closer to the table. My dad finally looked up, taking off his reading glasses. "We sold it." The room went strangely quiet. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath to hear what happened next. I blinked. "You sold it?" "Yes," my dad said, flatly, like he was explaining how to file taxes. "It was valuable. It was just sitting there. Your grandmother wasn't even using it anymore." It was collecting dust. It wasn't hers to use, I said, my voice trembling. It was Lucy's. Rachel laughed. A short, sharp bark of a laugh. She's 11, Emily. She doesn't own an $80,000 antique. Get a grip. My mom set her mug down with a soft, deliberate clink. Emily, don't start. Do not make a scene. Don't start? I repeated, my volume rising. You sold my daughter's cello. You sold her property. My dad leaned back, crossing his arms. It was a family asset. We liquidated a family asset. No, I said, my voice sharper now, cutting through their calm. It was set aside for Lucy. My grandma was clear about that. Explicitly clear. Rachel finally looked up, her eyes bright with annoyance. And my kids are what? Chopped liver? Ben and Olivia weren't even in the room, and somehow they were still the main characters of every conversation. My mom waved a dismissive hand toward the backyard window. We're doing something nice for the children, Emily. Try to be grateful. I stared at her. The children, she said again, like she expected a round of applause. Ben and Olivia deserve space. They deserve a place to play. It's going to be a beautiful pool. They deserve space, and Lucy doesn't? I shot back. Lucy deserves to be robbed so your kids can learn to swim? My dad rubbed his forehead, already tired of me acting like a person with feelings. Lucy will be fine with a student cello. You can rent one. Plenty of kids rent instruments. It builds character. Lucy will be fine. That is my family's favorite prayer. It translates to, we did what we wanted, and we're not interested in dealing with the fallout. I could feel my hands shaking violently. I forced them flat onto the cold granite counter to steady them. Where is it? I asked, quieter now, deadly serious. Who did you sell it to? My dad shrugged. A private collector. He paid by wire. It was a quick sale. Of course it was, I whispered. My mom's eyes sharpened into slits. And before you get any ideas, Emily, you are not telling your grandmother. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She doesn't need the stress, my mom said, her voice clipped and authoritative. She's settling in at her facility. The professionals are taking care of her. Let her have peace. You mean let you have peace, I said. My dad's expression hardened. Don't make this about you. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. It's about my kid. Rachel leaned forward, her voice sweet in that fake, toxic way that makes you want to check your wallet to make sure it's still there. Emily, honestly, you're always acting like Lucy is some tragic orphan. She's fine. She has you. The way she said you made it sound like a punishment. Like having me as a mother was the consolation prize for losing her dreams. I turned my back on them. I couldn't look at them for another second without screaming. I walked back down the hall. Lucy was still in the music room, standing in that empty corner, staring at the wall like she was waiting for someone to come tell her she mattered. I walked up to her, knelt down, and took her cold little hands in mine. We're going home, I said. Lucy nodded without arguing. That was the worst part. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. She just folded inward, like she'd been trained for this exact moment of disappointment. As we walked to the front door, my mom called after me. Emily. Do not call your grandmother. Do you hear me? Do not upset her. I didn't answer because I did hear her. I heard her loud and clear. I just didn't care anymore. I walked Lucy to the car, buckled her in, and got into the driver's seat. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just going to call my grandma. I was going to tell her absolutely everything. That night, Lucy practiced on the battered student cello her music teacher kept for emergencies. It was a plywood thing that had been dropped by fourth graders for a decade. It sounded like a cardboard box with strings, hollow, scratchy, and dead. Lucy didn't complain. She adjusted her posture like she always did. She focused, she frowned, she tried again. And every time the sound came out thin and wrong, she blinked hard like she was trying to hold something volatile inside her chest. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, pretending I was just casually watching. Pretending this was normal. Pretending my kid hadn't just been robbed by the people who were supposed to protect her. Lucy finally stopped and set the bow down. "I can still practice," she said, her voice careful. "It's just harder to hear the notes." "I know, honey," I said. She nodded and stared at her hands, flexing her fingers. Then she said something that broke me. "Maybe great-grandma, maybe she didn't mean for it to be mine yet. Maybe I wasn't good enough for it." I felt something inside me go very, very still. You see, Lucy had spent weekends in that music room with my grandmother, her great-grandma Margaret, learning in a way I couldn't give her. Not because I didn't love her, but because love doesn't automatically come with musical talent. My grandma had it. Lucy had it, too. It skipped me entirely, like the universe looked at my family and said, "Let's not put all the gifts in the same basket. Emily can have the anxiety, and Lucy can have the ear." My grandma used to sit beside Lucy and correct her grip with 2 fingers and a look. She'd say things like, "Your left hand is talking too loudly," which made Lucy giggle, then fix it anyway. She'd praise her the way kids actually need praising, specific and honest. Better. That phrase was better. Not the empty kind of praise my parents gave. Not the kind that says, "Good job, sport," while they're checking their email. Lucy felt seen with her. In a house where she usually had to shrink because that was the pattern, the music room was the one place she could expand. In my parents' house, my sister's kids, Ben and Olivia, could shout, spill juice on the white rugs, and run through hallways like tiny, chaotic kings and queens. And it was adorable. It was kids being kids. It was, oh, they're just so spirited. Rachel, her husband, and the kids were living there, too, one of those temporary arrangements that had lasted long enough to grow roots. Lucy, on the other hand, was expected to be quiet, polite, and grateful. If Lucy laughed too loudly, my mom would say, inside voice, "Sweetheart," with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. If Ben yelled, my dad would laugh and say, "He's got lungs on him." If Lucy needed anything at all, it was treated like a logistical inconvenience. Lucy learned to take up less space the way other kids learn math. It was a survival mechanism. My grandma noticed. She didn't always intervene loudly, she was still my mom's mother, and family politics are a landmine she tried to walk carefully, but she did something quieter. She carved out a space where Lucy didn't have to apologize for existing. That space was the music room. And the anchor of that space was the cello. It made practical sense, too. My apartment wasn't exactly designed for antique instruments and long practice sessions. It was safe, clean, and mine, but it was small. Sound traveled through the walls. Neighbors banged on the ceiling. And a cello like Grandma's, and now Lucy's, wasn't something you left in a corner near a radiator and hoped for the best. So we stored it there. In the controlled room. In the locked cabinet. With the little humidifier humming like a promise. And my grandma had been careful. Not just emotionally careful, paperwork careful. She'd had the cello appraised, photographed, documented. She'd shown me the file once, not because she wanted to brag about the value, but because she wanted me to understand the responsibility. "This is not just sentimental, Emily," she'd said, tapping the page with a manicured fingernail. "It's valuable. People get strange around valuable things." I'd nodded because yes, people got strange around valuable things. I just didn't think people meant my parents. My grandma had moved out less than a week ago into a place my mom described as perfect and so much safer and less stress. Which might have been true for my grandma, but it was definitely true for my mom. The move had been preceded by months of comments like, "This is getting hard," and she needs professional care, and it's not fair to the rest of us. The rest of us meaning my mom, my dad, and Rachel. Somehow never me. The one who actually showed up on Sundays. My grandma didn't leave kicking and screaming. She left the way she did everything, with a straight spine and a quiet decision. But once she was gone, the energy in the house shifted. The last set of eyes that mattered had left the room. And my family did what they always did when no one could stop them, they took. Lucy went to bed early that night. She didn't ask to call my grandmother. She didn't ask to complain. She just hugged me tightly before she fell asleep, squeezing me like she was holding herself together with my ribs. After she was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my phone. I kept thinking about the way my mom said, "Don't tell your grandmother." Not "don't upset her." Not really. Don't tell her. Like the truth was a weapon, and they expected me to keep it holstered for their comfort. I realized something then, and it wasn't pretty. I'd spent most of my life trying not to be difficult. I thought being easy was the same as being loved. It isn't. It's just convenient. And I wasn't going to teach Lucy that lesson. So, the next morning, I drove to my grandma's place. My grandma lived in a bright, tidy apartment in an independent living community that smelled like lemon cleaner and expensive hand soap. It wasn't depressing. It was controlled. There's a difference. A staff member at the front desk smiled and asked who I was visiting, as if my family hadn't just detonated itself. "Margaret," I said. "Ah," she said warmly. "She's in the lounge. She's been expecting you." Of course she had. My grandma was in a wingback armchair with a book in her lap and her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose like she was about to judge the author personally. She looked up the second I walked in. "Sit," she said. "Your face is doing that thing." I sat down across from her. "They did it," I said. My grandma didn't flinch. She just waited. So I told her. I kept it simple. I told her about the empty corner in the music room. I told her about the excavation in the backyard. I told her the words my parents used. Family asset. Lucy will be fine. Don't tell Grandma. My grandma listened without interrupting, the way people do when they're collecting evidence rather than hearing a story. When I finished, she closed her book slowly. "And Lucy?" she asked. "She went quiet," I said. "She asked if you changed your mind. She thinks she did something to lose it." My grandma's expression didn't crumple. It hardened. Not into rage, into clarity. "She thought it was her fault," my grandma said softly. I nodded. My grandma exhaled through her nose. One sharp breath. Then she asked, "When did you last see the file?" "What file?" "The cello documentation," she said. "Appraisal, photographs, identifiers." "I saw it months ago," I said. "You showed me." My grandma nodded. "Good." She leaned forward slightly. "Emily, do you have any texts about the pool? Any pictures? Anything that shows the renovation started right after I moved?" "I can screenshot Rachel's posts," I said. Because of course Rachel had posted. Rachel could post her own funeral if the lighting was good. My grandma nodded. "Do that." I stared at her. "Grandma, are you okay?" My grandma looked at me over her glasses. "I am not the one who should be worried," she said. Then she reached for her phone. "I'm going to make a call." I didn't ask who she was calling. My grandma had always had a way of keeping her cards close. My family treated that as sweet and old-fashioned. It wasn't. It was strategic. She made the call, spoke quietly for a few minutes, then hung up. "I will handle it," she said. I blinked. "How?" My grandma gave me a small smile. "Not a nice one." "Not with yelling," she said. "Which in our family would be a miracle." She reached across and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm, firm. Lucy is going to get her cello back, she said. My throat tightened. How do you know? My grandma's eyes sharpened. Because it was never theirs to sell. I froze. My grandma watched my face like she was choosing how much to reveal. Not today, she said gently, like she could read my thoughts. I will explain when it matters. But for now. She stood up. Go home. Be with your child. Let her practice. Let her feel normal where she can. What about mom and dad? I asked. My grandma's smile didn't reach her eyes this time. Let them enjoy their pool. I drove home feeling like I'd walked into a room where the air pressure had dropped, signaling a storm. And then, nothing happened. Not publicly. Not immediately. Weeks passed. 6, give or take. Lucy practiced on the student cello and on a rental we scraped together after her teacher found one at a discount. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't hers. The sound didn't bloom the same way. Lucy adjusted anyway, because Lucy was the kind of kid who adapted even when she shouldn't have to. The worst part was that she didn't complain. She just got quieter. She stopped humming in the car. Meanwhile, my parents posted pictures of the construction progress like they'd personally invented concrete. Rachel posted Olivia holding a tiny inflatable flamingo, Ben wearing goggles, captions like making memories and worth every penny. No apology. No mention of the cello. Just smiling faces and a giant hole in the ground filled with water. That night, the invite didn't come to me directly. It landed in the family group chat like a flyer taped to a telephone pole. Barbecue. Saturday 2 p.m. pool reveal. Bring a side if you're coming. Hope you can make it. Miss you. Just logistics. Because in my family, feelings are optional, but potato salad is mandatory. I stared at the screen. Lucy glanced over my shoulder, reading the text. Her face stayed blank. Are we going? She asked. I opened my mouth and didn't have an answer yet. The next morning, my grandma called me. We're going, she said. I swallowed. Grandma, what are you doing? My grandma's voice was calm. I'm doing what I should have done earlier. I started to ask more, but she cut me off. Emily, she said. I don't want Lucy watching you swallow this. I don't want her to learn that silence is the price of keeping the peace. My chest tightened. Okay. There was a pause. Then my grandma said, it's in motion. In motion, I repeated. The cello, she said. My heart kicked against my ribs. What do you mean? She just smiled through the phone, I could hear the smile, and said, you will find out soon enough. Saturday was hot in that oppressive way that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel. Perfect pool weather. Look how great we're doing, even the weather agrees. Lucy wore her swimsuit under her clothes because she's 11 and Hope is stubborn. She didn't talk much on the drive over. Neither did I. When we pulled up to the house, cars lined the street. People I recognized from holidays, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. The kind of crowd my family loved because it made them feel important. It was an audience. The backyard looked like a brochure. Blue water shimmered under the sun. The stone deck was spotless. The pergola had string lights draped artistically, like they'd watched one home improvement show and decided they were experts. Ben was already in the pool, splashing like a tiny shark. Olivia sat on a giant swan float with sunglasses on, looking bored. Rachel was holding a drink and laughing loudly at something someone said, seemingly hosting a talk show starring herself. My mom stood near the grill with that I am the matriarch posture she practiced in mirrors. My dad hovered nearby, smiling like a man whose life choices had just been validated by chlorine. And then Lucy and I walked in. My mom's smile flickered. Just a little. Not because she was surprised we came, but because she was irritated we had the audacity to show up with long faces. Emily, she said, bright and fake. You made it. Hi, Mom, I said. Rachel looked Lucy up and down. Hey. Lucy nodded politely. Hi, Aunt Rachel. Ben cannonballed into the water. Everyone laughed. Olivia squealed. Rachel beamed. Lucy stood beside me with her towel folded carefully in her hands, like she didn't know where to put herself. I watched her eyes drift over the pool, over the pergola, over the new loungers, over what her cello had turned into. Lucy swallowed hard. I put my hand on her shoulder. She leaned into it without looking at me. That's when I knew I wasn't here for revenge. I was here because my kid deserved to see what happens when you don't let people take from you and then demand gratitude for it. My dad clapped his hands. All right, everyone. Food's almost ready. My mom laughed, tapping a fork against a glass. And before we eat, we just want to say, this has been a long time coming. We're so happy to finally have a backyard the kids can really enjoy. Applause. Rachel raised her glass. To family, she said. Applause again. Lucy's fingers tightened around her towel until her knuckles turned white. Then someone, I think it was my dad's cousin, said, "Where's Margaret? Isn't she coming?" My mom's smile tightened. She's busy, she said quickly. She's resting. Right on cue, the side gate clicked. I turned. My grandma walked in. She wasn't in a wheelchair. She didn't look frail. She wore a crisp blouse and slacks and a calm expression that made the air feel colder even in the heat. But she wasn't alone. Beside her was Andrew, her lawyer and a longtime friend, carrying a slim, black folder. The backyard went quiet in that way crowds do when they sense a shift in the atmosphere but don't know the danger yet. My mom's face went pale. My dad's smile froze. Rachel's mouth opened slightly, then closed. My grandma stepped forward, her eyes sweeping over the pool like she was assessing a poorly done paint job. Well, she said pleasantly, her voice carrying over the silence. You've been busy. My mom forced a laugh, but it came out like a choke. Mom. This is a party. I know, my grandma said. That's why I came. She looked at me, then at Lucy. Lucy straightened a little, like her spine recognized safety. My grandma's gaze softened for a split second. Then she looked back at my parents, and the warmth evaporated. I heard you sold the cello, my grandma said. My mom's lips pressed together. We didn't want to upset you. My grandma held up a hand. You didn't want consequences. The word hit like a stone dropped into the water. My dad cleared his throat, stepping forward. Margaret, let's talk about this privately. My grandma smiled. And it was not a warm smile. Oh, Thomas, she said. You've had plenty of private time. A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. Someone shifted their drink from one hand to the other. Someone else pretended to inspect the grill. My grandma turned slightly, addressing the backyard the way you might address a room full of people at a town hall meeting. I won't keep you long, she said. I know you're here to swim. Rachel snapped, stepping forward. This is insane. Mom, make her stop. My grandma ignored her. She looked straight at my parents and said calmly, the cello was. Everyone leaned in. Held in trust for Lucy. The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like it could cut skin. My mom blinked, her face contorted in that specific way people look when they're trying to solve a math problem they didn't know they were being tested on. What? My grandma continued, her voice even, cutting through the humidity. I am the trustee. Lucy is the beneficiary. That cello was not a family asset for you to liquidate whenever you felt like renovating. It was legal property held in a trust. Which means selling it wasn't just a mistake, Thomas. It was theft. My dad stared at her like she'd suddenly started speaking Aramaic. Theft, he sputtered, his face flushing a deep, blotchy red. It's a cello. It was in the house. We needed. You wanted, my grandma corrected, her voice icy. Rachel's face flushed. She stepped off the patio, her heels clicking on the new pavers. You can't do this. You can't just come here and ruin a party because you're obsessed with paperwork. My grandma's eyes flicked to Rachel. I can. And I am. Andrew, the lawyer, stepped forward quietly. He didn't look like a shark, he looked like a tired uncle who was disappointed in everyone. He opened the slim black folder. My grandma didn't look at him, she didn't need to. She kept her gaze locked on my parents because she wanted them to feel the weight of it. I documented that instrument, she said. Appraisal, photographs, serial identifiers, insurance, the works. Because I've been alive a long time and I've met people. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Apparently, I'm related to some of them. A few people snorted. Dry humor does that, it slips under the skin while everyone is still deciding if they're allowed to laugh. My mom's voice shook, pitching higher. We didn't know anything about a trust. You never told us. My grandma nodded. Correct. You didn't know. Which is why you shouldn't have sold something that didn't belong to you. My dad finally found his voice, though it sounded thin and strangled. Where is it? Where is the cello? My grandma's smile returned. Safe. Lucy's head snapped up, her eyes widening. My grandma looked at her, and her face softened into something heartbreakingly gentle. It was recovered this morning, Lucy. Andrew made a few calls to the buyer and filed a police report regarding the stolen goods. The buyer was very cooperative once he realized he was in possession of stolen property. Lucy's breath caught. It wasn't a sob, and it wasn't a scream. It was a small, broken sound, like relief trying to escape a chest that had been too tight for 6 weeks. My grandma turned back to my parents, the softness vanishing instantly. You sold something you did not own. You took the money and you put it into. She gestured lazily at the shimmering blue water. This. Rachel snapped, pointing at the pool. It's for the kids. Look at them. My grandma's gaze sharpened. Lucy is a kid, Rachel. Rachel's mouth opened. Closed. She looked at Ben and Olivia, who were still splashing happily, oblivious to the fact that their grandmother was dismantling their parents' reality. Rachel wanted them to be a shield. They weren't. They were just kids in a pool paid for by their cousin's grief. Andrew cleared his throat gently. Margaret, he said quietly. My grandma nodded slightly. Andrew stepped toward my parents and Rachel. I have documents for you. My mom stepped back, hands raised like he was holding a weapon. No. I don't want them. Andrew didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He held out the papers like a waiter offering a check that no one wants to see but everyone knows must be paid. Notice to vacate, he said calmly. 60 days. My mom stared at the papers like they were radioactive. My dad's face went from pale to a terrifying shade of gray. Rachel's voice went shrill, cracking the air. You're kicking us out? Are you serious? My grandma tilted her head, looking genuinely puzzled. You're acting surprised. That's the part one don't understand. My mom's hand shook as she finally snatched the papers. Mom, you can't do this. This is my home. I raised my children here. My grandma's expression stayed calm, immovable. It is the house you live in. The difference in those sentences is a cliff, and you just walked off it. I felt Lucy press closer to my side, her hand gripping my shirt. Rachel's eyes flashed, desperate now. This is because of Emily, isn't it? Because she came whining to you? No, my grandma said, her voice cutting her off like a guillotine. This is because you sold a child's instrument, her future, her passion, and poured the money into a hole in the ground like it was monopoly money. You proved you cannot be trusted with assets that do not belong to you. And this house? She gestured to the brick facade behind her. This house is an asset that does not belong to you. My dad's voice cracked. We improved the property. The pool adds value. My grandma's eyes narrowed slightly. You improved your comfort with stolen money in a house you occupy at my grace. My mom looked like she might faint. The backyard was full of people who suddenly remembered they had literally anywhere else to be. Drinks were lowered to tables. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone laughed nervously, realized it was too late, and stopped. The exodus began, quietly at first, then rapidly. Lucy whispered, "Mom." I looked down. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was holding it in the way kids do when they don't want to make adults uncomfortable. I squeezed her shoulder. Then I looked at my parents, at Rachel, at the pool, at the way they'd built something shiny for Ben and Olivia and expected Lucy to clap for it. And I said, not loudly, but clearly enough that anyone still listening could hear, "Lucy isn't second-tier family." My mom's face twisted. "Emily, stop." "No," I said. "I'm not doing this today. I'm not playing the game where we pretend this is normal." Rachel scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "So what? Lucy gets everything now? Is that it?" I laughed, sharp and dry. "She was getting a cello, Rachel. That's it. She just wanted her cello." My grandma took a step toward Lucy, ignoring Rachel entirely. Her voice softened. "Sweetheart, you didn't lose it. It was taken. Do you understand the difference?" Lucy's lip trembled. "I thought I did something wrong. I thought you were mad." My grandma's eyes flashed with anger, not at Lucy, but at the situation, so quick it was almost invisible. "You did nothing wrong." Andrew held the papers steady. "My dad didn't take them." Rachel finally snatched hers from his hand like she could rip the reality in half if she tore the paper hard enough. My grandma looked at my parents one last time. 60 days, she said again. "You will leave. The house will be listed or put in trust. Andrew will handle the details." My dad's voice came out thin. "You can't be serious. Where will we go?" My grandma's smile was small and cold. "Try me." And that was it. Not screaming, not a meltdown, just a line drawn in permanent ink. As the backyard started to break apart, relatives avoiding eye contact, shuffling toward the gate, children being called out of the pool, my mom stood frozen. Rachel's face was red, hissing something at my dad. My dad didn't respond, he just stared at the pool like he was trying to calculate how much of his life had just evaporated. Ben and Olivia kept splashing for a few more minutes because kids don't understand adult consequences until the adults force them to. Lucy watched them, then looked at my grandma. "Do I get it back?" she whispered. "Really?" My grandma nodded. "Yes." Lucy let out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding for 6 weeks. And I realized something, too. My parents' faces had gone pale because my grandma had finally done the one thing my family couldn't survive, she stopped letting them pretend. Lucy got her cello back. It arrived the next day in a hard case that looked like it had traveled through several hands and regretted all of them. My grandma brought it over herself. She opened it with Lucy on my living room floor like it was a sacred ceremony. Lucy ran her fingers over the wood like she was touching something alive. She didn't say much. She didn't play it immediately. She just hugged my grandma so tightly I saw my grandma close her eyes for a second, letting herself feel the weight of the rescue. My parents, meanwhile, discovered a fun fact about selling something you don't own: people want their money back. The buyer came after them the way you'd expect, angry, embarrassed, and completely uninterested in my mom's "we didn't know" routine. The words repayment plan entered my parents' vocabulary like a chronic disease. They couldn't pay it all at once. $87,000 isn't pocket change, especially not for people who pour liquid assets into concrete and chlorine. 60 days went faster than they expected. My mom tried bargaining. She sent long, weeping emails. My dad tried guilt, showing up at my grandma's facility with flowers. Rachel tried rage, posting vague, aggressive status updates about betrayal and toxic elders. My grandma didn't move. She didn't block them, she just didn't respond. They packed up their life in a house they'd treated like a birthright and moved into something smaller. Something cheaper. Something that definitely didn't have a pool. Rachel and her husband didn't end up saving my parents. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Rachel suddenly remembered how to distance herself when consequences showed up. One minute it was, we all agreed this was for the family, and the next it was, I told Dad this was a bad idea. Families like mine have a special talent for rewriting history on the fly. Ben and Olivia adjusted. Kids always do. They missed the pool for a summer, complained about the smaller yard, and then moved on to the next thing. Lucy adjusted, too, but in a different way. She started speaking up more. Small things at first. Actually, I was sitting there. I don't like that joke. No, I'm not okay with that. The first time she did it in front of my mom, during a forced holiday dinner in their new, cramped dining room, my mom's mouth tightened like she'd tasted something bitter. Lucy, she warned. No, Lucy said simply. And I smiled. My grandma updated her plans after everything happened, quietly, thoroughly, the way she does. She didn't give speeches about it. She just slid a folder across my kitchen table one evening and said, Andrew's handling the paperwork. I'm putting the big house into a trust. I'll be the trustee. You and Lucy will be the beneficiaries. We're keeping it. So, the day my parents moved out, Lucy and I didn't just watch. We waited. A week later, we moved in. No ceremony. Just boxes, keys, and a house that finally felt like it could breathe. The first night we slept there, the house sounded different. No construction noise. No performative laughter. No heavy footsteps pacing like ownership. Just quiet, the kind that feels earned. Then my grandmother moved back in. This time, not as someone being taken care of, not as an inconvenience managed in a spare room, but as the person who belonged there. Lucy helped her unpack like it was a celebration. She carried sweaters and books and that little tin of peppermint tea like each one was a vote for the future. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, my grandma sat in the living room while Lucy practiced. No shrine of silence. No tight smiles. No inside voice, sweetheart. Just music filling a house that finally knew who it was for. When spring came, Lucy auditioned for the regional youth orchestra. She walked onto the stage carrying her cello, and she didn't look terrified. She looked ready. She got in, obviously. But this time, she had her instrument and something else. Proof. Proof that when someone tried to take her future and build a pool with it, the adults who mattered didn't tell her to swallow it. They showed up. They told the truth. And they made sure she never had to apologize for wanting a place at the table. My parents still have the pool, technically. Or, well, the people who bought the house after the bank foreclosed on them probably enjoy it. We don't visit. We have our own space now. So, what do you think? Did my grandma go too far by kicking them out, or did she not go far enough? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about families who find out the hard way that silence isn't a currency. See you in the next one.